I'd like to call the February 21st, 2022 Canal Winchester City Council work session to order, please. Roll call.
Miss Amick?
Present.
Miss Amos?
Here.
Mr. Busker?
Here.
Mr. Clark?
Here.
Mr. Milliken?
Here.
Mr. Shea?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here. Also in attendance, Mayor Ebert, Public Service Director Matt Peoples, Development Director Lucas Hare, Finance Director Amanda Jackson, and Construction Services Director Bill Sims. Mr. Sims is up for a report.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Clark. The 2023 street program is currently out for bid. The bid opening will be March 3rd. We had a cost estimate on that project of $1.295 million, so just basically right at $1.3 million for that project. The increased cost this year is associated with the work we are going to do with the pavement in the areas where we're installing water line back in the Manor Dye subdivision. The Three Seasons Shelter, we've awarded the contract to Ferguson. We're just basically processing the contract right now, and we'll get them rolling on material procurement here shortly. So, and I touched on the water line a little bit, but the water line replacement project that V3 is working on, they're finalizing details on the plans and gathering information we need for the bidding documents. It's our intention to have that out for bid. I'm targeting the 15th of March to put that out. And McGill Phase 2, as I mentioned before, not much has changed since my last talk, but EMH&T was working on some preliminary design information. They provided a number of cost proposals and options to us, and we're still evaluating those. On the private development side, Evans Farm construction is continuing. They are moving along now with the Robinette Way work, so they're moving on to some of the public improvements. They've got some water line installed and a fair amount of public storm sewers installed at this point. The roadway is not quite to subgrade level, but it's getting pretty close. It's getting a lot more evident. If you go out there, you can start to kind of see how things will lay out now for Robinette. Green Gate development, we've been looking at plans for the next phases, 4, 6, and 7. Those plans aren't approved yet, but in talking to the developer, it sounds like they'd like to do at least sections 4 and 6 this summer. So. And the sheets at Gender and Winchester Pike is underway. There's not a lot of public impact there beyond the right turn lane that'll come in off of Gender Road, but that work will occur in the springtime. Any questions?
Bill, do you want to mention the Dye District residents meeting you're having?
Sure. I have not. As part of the water line project, and because we have the road work in that same neighborhood following that, we'll be having a public information open house for the folks of that neighborhood. So Woodsview, Cherokee, and Mohican. So they'll have an opportunity to come and they can look at plans, ask questions, and so forth. So I've just put together the notice to get that out. Tentatively, we're looking at March 8th, Wednesday evening for that, but we'll get that confirmed here in the next day or so we can get our letter sent out.
Mr. Shea.
Ms. Sims, can you put that on, like, when Hannah puts the post out for information meetings and stuff, but like have a link to the city's website where you've got all that information easily accessible to find? Because sometimes,
The meeting?
not the meeting, the actual plan that they're going to do so people can see it. That way if they
Yes.
miss the meeting, they can just link through it and look at it. And because sometimes when you're searching for stuff, it's hard to find, but if we just got it up there on a link, it might help communicate it to some folks that aren't able to make it.
Yes, absolutely. We'll, I have both V3 and EMH&T working on the exhibits, so when those are complete, we can put those on the website along with, some general information at this point.
Thank you. That'd be really cool.
Yeah.
And I got another question.
Yes, sir.
Green Gate, you said sections 4 and 6. How many sections are there in that total plat development?
So, 7, so 4, 6, and 7, so basically the north loop, and that is the completion of the Green Gate project.
Okay.
So they're basically 2/3 developed with the roads and utilities at this point. 1/3 of it has home construction occurring, 1/3 sitting empty, and then the remaining third will be hopefully constructed this summer.
They're moving pretty quick out there.
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Ms. Amos?
Mr. Sims, can you please remind me, on that Sheets development, is that right in, right out from Gender and then Winchester Pike access?
It's right in from Gender, and then you use Winchester Pike for basically your full access point to bring you to the traffic light.
Thank you, that's what I want to make sure.
Yep.
Any further questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Sims.
Thank you.
Brings us to a request for council action, ordinance 23-009. Clerk, please read the title.
An ordinance to authorize the mayor and finance director to enter into an agreement for the purchase of a Case IHF 75C four-wheel drive tractor rear and wing flail mowers and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Peoples?
Thank you, Mr. Clark. This is a tractor that we discussed during the budgeting process that we're partnering with Violet Township on. It's a full-size roadside mower. It will replace the ones that we have in use now. Originally, we had, when we went through the budgeting process, Violet Township was going to purchase, and we would reimburse them. They requested that we purchase, and they reimburse us on this one. So that's what this ordinance is for. We are requesting a declared emergency just for so we can get it procured and be ready for mowing season.
Questions? Ms. Amos?
Has this already gone on their agenda for approval on their end for the financing? Do you know?
I believe it was in part of their budget, yes.
So it was budgeted, but not, an appropriation hasn't been approved yet?
Not to my understanding.
Okay.
I don't have a question. Oh, go ahead, Mr.
Mr. Peoples, was this an even split between the two?
Yes.
I don't have any other question. I don't have any questions, but I think this is an example of good governing, of reaching out to a neighbor when they have a need and we have a need, and we're not going to need it full-time, and saving us money than have to go out and buy it and just have it sit there half the time. So, a job well done, Mr. Peoples.
Thank you.
I'll just throw one more thing, because Mr. Peoples and I talked about it. It's also a big safety enhancement for our road crews, because this is going to be the tractor that's used along 33. It's going to have an enclosed cab, which will offer a substantial level of more protection than just the open tractors they're using now. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Good.
Much larger, much heavier tractor as well from a safety standpoint.
Do I have a motion to move ordinance 23-009 to full council?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Shea.
Second.
Second by Mr. Buzzkirk. Roll call, please.
Mr. Shea?
Yes.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
We don't need an emergency. Okay, it's in, all right. Brings ordinance 23-010. Clerk, please read the title.
An ordinance to amend the 2022 appropriation ordinance number 22-041, amendment number 2.
Ms. Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Clark. As you may recall, we've been talking about all the capital projects we have coming up here at the city within this year and in the next few years. And I had sort of forewarned you that this appropriation amendment would be coming. To kind of go through it real quick, line by line, in the general fund, we're asking for $150,000. This is all capital outlay related. $125,000 of that is for the street program that Mr. Sims spoke about earlier. And then there's also $25,000 in there for the McGill Park Three Seasons Shelter House. That was a contract that council approved 2 weeks ago, and we have enough funding except for that $25,000. So we are in need of those additional funds to make sure we can get that project completed this year. As Mr. People spoke about, the tractor purchase with Violet Township, we had originally included $50,000 in our original budget. That was approved by City Council. Now that the change has been made for us to purchase it and have Violet reimburse us, we need to appropriate the other funds needed for that purchase. So that's where the $47,000 to that capital outlay line item is coming from. And then in the Gender Road TIF fund, we're asking for $317,000. This is all for engineering costs for the Gender Road Phase 6 project. You may recall that we've spoke about how we were preliminarily awarded safety funding for that project. That funding is contingent on the completion of an interstate modification study that needs to be approved by ODOT. So part of that $360,000 approximately, is specifically for that study. So we would like to get moving on that. And then finally, the last section in this ordinance is something we don't do very often around here. I'm not sure that many of you have actually seen me ask for the transfer of already appropriated money, but that's what I'm asking for in our local fiscal recovery fund. So this is our COVID funding, round 2 of COVID funding that we got from the federal government. When I did the original budget, I had $83,400 in the operating expenses line item. We are asking to transfer that to the capital outlay line item for that 3-season shelter house project. The original expense that we had budgeted for with that $83,000 was inadvertently also included in the general fund that you have already approved. So we're going to take that money out of the general fund and then use all of the local fiscal recovery fund money for the 3-season shelter house. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Shea?
When that 317 comes out of the Gender Road TIF, what's going to be left in there?
Quite a bit. I don't have an answer off the top of my head, but I can tell you that last year and this year, well, last year we received about $575,000 to $580,000 into that fund, and we will receive that, if not more, this year. So there is quite a bit of money in there, but I will get you a definite answer.
Oh, just knowing that it's a good, healthy one, I'm just more curious. So the TIF can only be used for Gender Road improvements then? Is that how that works?
The Gender Road TIF can be used for public improvements on Gender Road, yes.
Okay. Any of the ancillary streets, like the, where we're talking about possibly doing a roundy down the?
On Winchester Boulevard?
Yes.
Yes, there is potential for the use of funds on that project as well from that fund.
Okay, thank you.
It's any project, any public infrastructure project that benefits the TIF area. So as long as there's a correlation to the TIF area, we can use it for those purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Peoples, going back to the ODOT Gender Road interchange study, is that part of the Gender Road Phase 6, or is that something ODOT's doing separately, or is
No,
it
as
part of it?
Ms. Jackson said, our funding was contingent on an approved interchange modification study.
Okay, is
So
that because we are modifying?
Yes, because we are modifying the operation of that. They need to make sure that it doesn't impact mainline, which we don't believe it will, but it is a step that we have to take in order to secure that total funding.
Will it study the flow with that change, the change being taken, the flow of traffic and everything? That'll
Yes.
be part of it? Okay, that's good. Okay. Thank you. Anything further? All right. Do I have a motion to bring ordinance 23-010 to full council?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Amick. Second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Shea. Roll call, please.
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Mr. Shea?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milligan?
Yes.
Brings us to our last ordinance tonight, ordinance 23-011. Clerk, please read the title.
An ordinance approving the final development plan for the Meyer store located at 8300 Meyer Drive.
Mr. Hare? Oh, you're not Mr. Hare.
I'm here this evening.
All right.
All right, you're gonna have to bear with me. I have not used this clicker, so hopefully there's not any learning curve to it. I think, Jordan, if you go to hit view, you can hit full screen mode and I can click through it. at the top, no, the top left of the toolbar, where it says File, Edit, if you click View. And then full screen mode is third from the bottom.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see how this works. So I'll be here this evening presenting the final development plan for the Planning and Zoning Commission for the Myers Store update at 8300. It's supposed to be Meyer Drive, excuse me. They are requesting this evening a final development plan amendment to the Myers Store to add a pharmacy drive-through window and to relocate the garden center. This property is approximately 56 acres. That's in the big kind of purple swath there. It is part of the Myers Store and a number of developed and undeveloped outlots as part of the overall Meyer development. For a brief history of this property, the Myers Store and the out parcel development pattern book was approved in September of 2006 with ordinance 74-06. This approved the plans for the 207,000 square foot Myers Store and 23 acres, on 23 acres, and 32 remaining acres would be for the commercial outlots that surround the development. Some of those outlots have been developed today. I apologize, my aerial is a little old. It's not showing Chipotle, Pediatrics Associates, or the new Taco Bell on the aerial. When looking at the Myers Store, this is the primary corner of activity that I'm going to be talking about. But back when Myers wanted to get approval for the main store in 2006, they were showing a pharmacy drive-up on the front southwest corner of the building. For those that are familiar where the pharmacy location is inside of the facility, the original location for the pharmacy pickup had you pulling in front of the building with your driver's window facing the main facade. So you'd have to cross over traffic to get to the drive-through loop. If anybody's been to the pharmacy in Lancaster, that was the original design for this location. Planning and Zoning Commission at the time didn't like it, didn't think it was safe, so the applicant pulled it. The applicant is going through a major remodel on the interior of the store right now, and with their remodels, they're looking to add their newest design for the drive-through loop for convenience for the customers. The design is centered on this kind of area I've photographed on the screen. The area with the white wall kind of wrap, that's their Three Seasons room that they kind of close off during the winter, where they store like their Christmas trees and extra Christmas decorations. During the summer, it's some mulch and other planted material. That will be completely removed. They will shift the fenced-in area for the garden center 67 feet back, extend it as far back as they could get it on their property, which I'll show you a kind of a photograph of the area. And then that photo you see will be where the primary drive-through loop gets constructed. So looking at the plans provided by the applicant, again, around 2,500 square feet of that Three Seasons room will be removed, and they will be working at approximately 29,000 square feet of area on this side of the building. The drive-through loop is kind of highlighted in gray on the left, and then the darker gray on the right is where the garden center will be expanded to. There is a dashed line, I wish there was a way I could point for you guys. A dashed line that's within that gray area on the right-hand side that shows the current extent of the garden center. They're going to try to pick up some of the square footage they are losing with the pharmacy drive-through relocation. With this relocation here, they're looking to change some of the traffic patterns, which isn't shown on this screen, but it will be on the next one. As you can see now, there is currently 2 lanes on every direction on Meyer Drive going in and out of the site. This site has a southbound and westbound lane on the screen to your left, and then there's an eastbound lane that goes to the dead end of Meyer Drive on the right. What they're looking to do with this proposal is remove the eastbound lane on the right to have the traffic flow be all directions as you get to that stop bar. And then that will help clean up the traffic heading up to the loop. You can merge right, get in the drive-through loop lane, or you can continue straight and head to the parking lot throughout the main facility of the store. Part of the design concept when working with the applicant was really trying to restrict traffic movements from trying to do a U-turn, heading south, leaving the site, trying to hit the drive-through loop, trying to get in last second, trying to cut through a parking lot aisle as you leave to kind of merge in with the rest of the traffic. So what the applicant is showing is they are installing 3 additional landscape islands that will separate the drive-through traffic loop from the rest of the vehicular traffic. Another component that's part of this proposal is the island in the center of the drive-through loop will feature all of their seasonal hanging baskets and flowers that are for sale. That original corner kind of shot I showed you guys with that big open concrete, that's what it's used for now. Typically during the off-season, like right now, there's nothing there. So what they would like to do is utilize the center island. As part of that, pedestrian safety was something that we talked with the applicant a lot about how to improve it and make it as safe as possible. They're showing on the screen that there's going to be some fenced-in sections that will kind of delineate the limits of that seasonal area. There are pedestrian crosswalks, warning signs, really good deterrent measures to keep you from wandering into the drive-through traffic. While it's slow moving, it's still moving. Here's some site photographs. So the front is the area that's being heavily modified. The back photograph is where the fence is being extended to eat up the rest of this grassy area, just to kind of give you guys some visuals of what they're working with for space. Some renderings put together by the applicant. This kind of shows a pretty picture of the drive-through loop. Again, there are 3 landscape islands that will be installed on the west side of the drive-through loop to help screen traffic, force traffic flow in a certain route. The fencing and additional bollards being installed in the middle to help really restrict pedestrian flow. One of the things when staff was reviewing this rendering really specifically was that they're showing some bagged and bulked kind of heavy products in the middle of this island. One of the things that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended as part of their approval was really to eliminate and prohibit any sort of bagged pallet displayed materials that would really force you to stop and load your vehicle from the drive-through loop rather than somewhere else that's more safe and convenient at the store. The applicant at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting had no problem meeting that request. Another item when looking at this kind of rendering in particular is the fencing for the garden center is now immediately adjacent to an active traffic pattern exiting the pharmacy loop. The CETA Land Use Committee met at the beginning of February to look at this proposal. They recommended that the fencing kind of be looked at from a site triangle perspective on when you pull up to leave, when will the fencing be in your way versus if they pull it back or change the angle of it, will you have a clear sight line to actually exit the drive-through loop? Again, the applicant had no problem with looking at that request. The Planning and Zoning Commission also, when looking at this rendering and additional sheets provided, there was some detectable warnings as shown on the screen, but there were some stop signs indicated for the pedestrian traffic instead of yields, other more intuitive ways to understand this is a pedestrian crossing. So they asked that be further evaluated during the engineering review at a later stage. Another kind of view here, just showing you the drive-through loop. Again, that green corner of the fencing, the CETA Land Use Committee really recommended angling it or stepping that back to make it easier to see as you're exiting the drive-through loop. This rendering here shows the landscaping that will be installed to help screen it, again, to help delineate traffic flow. When looking at the landscape plan provided by the applicant, the landscaping didn't really show plants being installed, just their rendering did. So staff had asked the applicant to update the landscape plan to show plants that will be in there, make sure they're compatible, have the urban forester review it. The applicant had no problem with that and indicated it was really just an error on their part, not showing anything there. This rendering shows kind of the revamp within the garden center. Currently they have one shade structure for the plant area. You see they will have 2 now. They're also showing a hoop house kind of greenhouse structure for more year-round plantings. I believe this is also going to be irrigated to have a little nicer of a product in that. This is something they're doing with most of their store remodels. Part of the discussion with the applicant on their request to amend the final development plan was this has to go to city council for approval. It just makes it unique that council wanted everything in this Myers corridor to go before them. And as doing such, we're really looking at how to put your best foot forward. A couple years ago, the city worked with the Myers landscape team to try to clean up and replant basically everything in these red boxes with alive plants, better plants, try to make the landscaping more maintenance-free. The applicant really went out and addressed and said, we tried to look at it 2 years ago. It really didn't work. Let's see if we can do it again. So they highlighted these areas in red on target areas. They're going to work with our urban forester on either totally replanting or doing in a better manner to make it easier to maintain long-term. That seems to be the theme with this site, is they just have so much they can't maintain it. As part of that discussion, we talked about the brick columns that are out there now that have the Canal Winchester C and not the CW in the limestone medallions. The applicant indicated they have no issues with popping those out and replacing them, making them really brand appropriate for the community. And then looking at the photos here at the front of the facility, our urban forester looked at kind of the plant species that's out there now. It's a calorie pear species that's illegal to plant in the state of Ohio today. So our urban forester asked the applicant to pop those out and put more appropriate plant species that aren't invasive in its place. Again, the applicant had no problem cleaning those items up, thinks it makes sense, refreshing the store, making it safer really for the customers as well. So the CETA Land Use Committee again met on February 2nd to review the final development plan. They recommended approval with the two conditions as discussed earlier, that the pharmacy drive-through loop be evaluated for a sightline triangle to reduce concerns with oncoming traffic. And they also asked that the applicant works with the city to explore a second access point on the Meyer Drive. That's something I haven't really talked about up to this point. The concern with this is that traffic that is trying to head south, leaving the pharmacy loop, if there's anybody stacked at the stop sign, they would have to be queued up and really wait for somebody to be like, hey, you can come on and exit out. The CETA Land Use Committee thought about really, like my two red arrows are, having to go straight through to have a second kind of out path, or something further east that could even be used for semi-truck traffic, so the trucks can enter behind the facility without ever having to cross in front of the facility at all. Those are things that, Planning and Zoning Commission didn't want to say yes, like to either, because they don't know the technical in and outs to it. So they further recommended that be deferred to the engineering review, which would be the step after City Council's review. So again, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends that the final development plan FDP 23-001 be approved with the 4 conditions. The drive-through islands be only used for seasonal hanging baskets and flower displays. No mulch, topsoil, other bagged products, nor landscaping stone and other pallet display items be stored or displayed in this area. That sheet LS1.2 include information on the plant materials of the new landscape islands around the pharmacy drive-through loop. That the CETA Land Use Committee recommendations be further evaluated during civil engineering review for vehicular traffic and pedestrian safety within the drive-up loop. And that the brick columns on Daly Road and Busey Road have the limestone medallions replaced with the Canal Winchester CW logo. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to help answer. The applicant is here this evening, if you guys have any questions for them as well.
Mr. Moore, you said that during the winter time that, this, I don't know if you call it pavilion, where the hanging baskets are stored, there wouldn't be anything there? Is that, did I hear
So if you look
correctly?
at the photo I took here at the beginning of February,
Yeah,
during the winter months, they just don't put anything there. It's really intended to be a seasonal display for their garden center. And that the applicant, explained that they have an area now for that seasonal display. They just want to relocate it to the center of the pharmacy loop.
Yeah.
It also just kind of activates and doesn't leave like another dead corner. And there's also a pedestrian entry to the garden center now within this zone. So this at least provides a visual path on how to enter from the outside of the parking lot still.
Okay, so is the purpose of the crosswalk, I mean, is it meeting some kind of code for a number of exits? Or, because it doesn't look like you're really supposed to get to the parking lot from that crosswalk. Is it just there so you can shop the hanging baskets?
So there's one in the top left corner of the pharmacy loop in front of that red car.
Oh, okay.
So that gets you to the main walk in front of the entire store.
Okay,
The second one is to get you from that island into the garden center area.
okay.
Really, it's designating those two locations because I guess theoretically you'd start at the front door of the store and then work your way to the garden center through. I think there is a benefit to having them restricted to two locations and not between every landscape island, saying a pedestrian could be crossing here. It makes it harder, I think, for a vehicle to know what's going on, and it would reduce the stacking, because you're not supposed to be stopped on top of that striped bar.
Yeah.
So you would essentially reduce the stacking to 3 cars instead of 7.
Okay. That makes sense. My only other concern would be that if P and Z's recommendation was that they, not use this area for the bigger bulk items, and I know you mentioned the fencing potentially blocking line of sight for traffic, but just in my experience working retail, when inventories come in, they're going to put things wherever they need to put things. And I know we've had not necessarily inventory issues with Meyer, but when we had the landscaping issues was a couple years ago, we had to ask them to clean up things. And so, I mean, how do we, I guess, hold them to that?
So if the condition of approval is they can only display hanging baskets and seasonal displays and no bagged or pallet stored items are out there, if they start having bagged or pallet stored items out there, then we can send them a zoning violation based off of the final development plan. That's what makes a plan district unique, is they're writing their own code.
Okay.
So this would be a condition of their code saying they can't do this.
Okay, great. Nothing.
Ms. Ames?
A couple questions. So first of all, I saw on the front where they have the garden entrance, where's the actual entrance for people to pick up large items? Because currently, you pick up from the front.
So the screen that I have up right here, the 2 striped locations are the fire exit paths where there are gates to leave the garden center.
Okay.
The applicant indicated that they could sign those locations as bulk pickup or loading zones or what have you on the south side. So if you wanted to do that, then you could pull up past the pharmacy and then have it in that location.
So it's not in the way of the pharmacy, I see that. Is there going to be clear signs indicating it's a loading zone?
It's something that we,
Because it looks like it's in a parking area.
yeah, so it's something we can, clearly identify during the civil review. There are parking spaces there now. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody park there.
No, I
It's
think
something, it's something we can look at.
Yeah, I just want to make sure people don't get because so many people are used to picking up in front, I want to make sure that we're clearly identifying that pickup has been moved and it's not going to be that front.
So anybody picking up there now would be not in a loading zone. They would be doing it at their own risk.
And we see it all the time.
Right, so this is not a loading zone now to make everybody on council aware.
And I agree with the mulching, I think it's dangerous, it could potentially block the view. One of my questions in that center area where they have the seasonal, there's not going to be any point in time where they're putting up temporary fencing or anything to do Christmas trees or anything of that nature. It's specifically spring, summer, early fall, is that correct? So we're not going to have a temporary Christmas tree lot?
That would be a question for the applicant. They did not indicate they would have Christmas tree sales or any of those types of items. Really, what grabbed my attention for even my staff recommendation to P&Z on the mulch was the fact that the person who did the rendering just threw it in here. If they never did that, then it would never have crossed my mind that this could be a potential loading zone. So I think it's something the applicant could answer and something you guys could address with modifying the recommendations in the ordinance.
Okay. Couple more questions. That road that goes back to Pickerington area, are we ever going to finish that road?
So Myers is required to finish the connection with the next out parcel they sell.
So one additional out parcel and that road gets finished?
Yep, so whoever builds the next one will trigger that being completed.
Thankfully, Mr. Milliken had one of the questions I had. We've had so many issues with landscaping there. Countless letters, countless phone calls from them not monitoring it. I'm glad that they're going in and doing some of this, but consistency has not been their strong suit. So I'd love for somebody from Myers to speak to that if possible.
Yeah, that was definitely the whole reason behind this page in your guys' packet, was letting them know that the plan approval had to go to city council for ultimate approval, and you guys are a body that can make any condition a part of it, and you don't have to follow zoning, because zoning wouldn't have anything to say but maintain it. And so part of that discussion had some of these limestone medallions being swapped out to be more appropriate, to look at the landscaping and to clean it up. 2 years ago, I worked with the urban forester to totally revamp and change the landscaping behind the kind of triangle marker that says "Welcome to Canal Winchester," to make it just grasses, so that way there's like zero maintenance behind it. Those are the types of things we want to work with the applicant on making the landscaping that's out there nice and as little effort as possible, showing that they have put not the best effort in maintaining it over time.
Any effort would have been good on that one, but thank you, that's all I have for now.
Mr. Moore, I think most of my questions have been answered, but I did have a question about, I called it a racetrack, so thank you for calling it a loop, because that's more appropriate. If you are in line in the loop and you need to leave due to an emergency of some sort, is there any kind of emergency exit vehicular exit out of the loop?
No. If you are in an emergency in your car, get out of your car, right? Don't stay in the burning car.
I'm thinking of some mom whose kid's throwing up in the back seat or something like that, and they're like, I got to do something. So
Yeah.
there is no way to get out of the loop. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Nothing designed.
I have a couple additional points as well. On sheet 6, it shows the crosswalk striping as 6-inch lines, and then off to the side in their detail, they call it 4-inch lines. And then in the rendering, it looks like they're much wider, so I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, those items will get cleaned up during the civil review. The civil review will basically look at the stormwater calcs, all these pedestrian, make sure there's ADA access. Those striping items are something that our engineer, probably would have caught as well.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the appropriate scale is, so I would defer to whatever engineer, if it's 4, 6, 8.
Sure. The other question is related to the pedestrian path. On sheet 6, it shows the detectable warning paths there on that island. There is an existing walk there, but those paths no longer go anywhere except into traffic. Will those be removed?
I'm sure it's something we would look at during the review. Again, I defer all the technical engineerings to the people that know how to read it like you do. So.
I will say quickly that I do appreciate the fact they're putting money into it and revitalizing it.
Yes.
We do appreciate that, so.
Mr. Shea?
Hey, Mr. Moore, thank you for the great presentation. So on this one here, right along the edge of the loop where they're doing the landscaping along the parking lot or the roadway that goes in front of the store, is there I can't tell if there's a sidewalk there for people that as they walk in to walk along, or is that median, or is that island there abut the road like a curb?
Along the front of the entire store?
Especially here where we're changing it.
Yeah, so, this isn't good at all. So there is a concrete path along the entire front of the store. If you The islands just have breaks in between them, so it's not one continuous island all the way through. But at the corner there where the island, the third island ties into the existing walk, that will be the existing sidewalk along the front of the facility.
So there's no sidewalk in front of those islands in the roadway?
Okay.
Correct.
Is there, should there be? I mean, because there's parking there, and you walk
Parking.
in there,
Parking just to, in between those two island breaks right there?
no, there's parking going out this way, right here, like this is all parking here.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you park here and you walk in, you know, I mean, is there?
I don't think there's enough room to do a sidewalk and keep the landscape island.
Okay.
If the island were to go away, it could be replaced with a raised sidewalk, but then there would be no screening for the drive-through.
Well, I like the screening, I just making sure we're keeping that flow of pedestrian availability there. right?
If you, this graphic I left, and I asked the applicant to keep, because it shows the wrong exit striping, well, with the loop still there, and that's why we asked them to change the striping, because looking at this here, you have like 6 inches in between when you turn in versus merging. So the area is tight to work with now.
Okay. I just think that's gonna be, we gotta make sure we've got a way for them to flow in there. I mean, I guess I just walk across the parking lot, but, you know, it's just, usually you walk up to the concrete and walk over. 'Cause try not to get run over by somebody. And I got one other ask, and this is more of a preventative, proactive ask. Truck parking has been a source of complaints with our residents for aesthetics and sometimes noise. We are having a lot of industrial development in that particular corridor. Can we make one of the conditions of this that there is to be absolutely no overnight truck parking in the, I would say the front part, like the retail part of it? I understand if they want to park by the dock, park in the back of the building, but in the front, I mean, I don't think that's the image we're trying to send about our city.
Yeah, I think, again, this is a planned district, so with them opening up the development text to request for this, any parking type restrictions that the council wants to add to the text to regulate the site is totally appropriate.
Well, I'm
Let's
throwing-
do it.
Throwing that out there.
Yep.
Second that.
Again, the applicant's here if you guys have anything for them as well.
Are you okay with that, Mr. Applicant?
Anything
I
further?
wanted to see what his thoughts were on the landscaping.
I would say, I got Taco Bell today for lunch, and I gotta say though, it's like the nicest Taco Bell I've ever seen. And it really is coming together. It's a really nice development, and I think this continued growth and changes are gonna really make it pop. What's the plan for the back half here, or the back third?
So the area in darker green, that's, you can see it's kind of been farmed and striped. That is not owned by Meyer.
Okay,
That is owned by a member of the original family that did the planned district.
okay,
That is zoned the same as Meyer, but the Meyer zoning also allows for any industrial development on it. It's a planned industrial district, so it allows for industrial or commercial. It's like a unique hybrid that way. The little triangle piece just south of that farm ground is, I believe, going to be an electric substation for South Central Power. That's what they're looking at putting there. And then around kind of the Meyer Drive extension to the east of the gas station are all Meyer out parcels. The original plan had 3 or 4 out parcels within the area with a new private road, kind of like where Taco Bell's accessed from, that will loop through it. The original development text called for like a hotel and a big story office building there, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. That was 2006, you know, not 2023, so.
everything's just getting, it's too expensive.
All right. Nothing else? Do I have a motion to move ordinance 23-011 to full council?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Shea, second.
I'll second it.
Second by Mrs. Amos. Roll call, please.
Mr. Shea?
Yes.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
Or was it?
Whichever
Amick
one
or
of
Amos?
us you want.
Yeah.
You said-
Pick an A.
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Miss Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Okay, that concludes our ordinances for tonight. Brings us to old or new business. Is there anything further to address the pedestrian safety issue tonight?
I just want to say thank you to the city for responding to the request of council to really look into that and putting that three-way stop in the future. Thank you.
Just an update on that, we did get an exhibit from EMH&T on how that should be laid out. We have to order some materials, so as soon as that comes in, we'll get that put together.
Anything else? All right. Well, it brings us to the police study issue under old business. I can say tonight we have not a presentation, Mr. Von Eckertsberg. How bad did I butcher that?
That was perfect, actually.
Okay.
You must have a little German in you.
No. He is here tonight to talk about, we had conducted and asked for a police department staffing study to just determine if we were right-sized for our city with our contract that we have with the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office. And so we were able to contract with the Ohio Police Chiefs Association and Mr. Von Eckertsberg and John Winslick.
That's
who,
the easy one.
Did the study, and so tonight we got the report and had an opportunity to read it. So he was just here to answer some questions. We also have Deputy Chief Collins and Sergeant Collins from the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office, if we have any specific questions for them as well. Did I give you a promotion?
Sergeant Walker.
Sergeant, okay, Sergeant Walker, I'm sorry. Okay. Go ahead. I'll just turn it over to anybody that has questions.
Would it be okay if I just say, first of all, I just want to thank everybody who we
Sure.
worked with on this. And I just realized, Sergeant Walker, I apologize, but I didn't give you credit in the report for the work you did with us, so I apologize. But Sergeant Walker, Chief Deputy Collins, the folks from the city, Amanda Jackson, Mary Ebert, and Matt Peoples, Miss Dowdy, Alyssa Dowdy, and the communication supervisor over at Fairfield County, Joe Morris. So we got a lot of help on this, and I appreciate everybody's cooperation. Did you want me to go through some of the questions that I received from you guys and kind of walk through those a little bit?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay, so first of all, as you can see, I don't want to belabor what you've already read, but I will just summarize briefly that a police staffing study has to look at several methods for trying to determine how a police agency should be staffed, because there is no industry single standard for making that determination, okay? So whenever we do a study like this, we try to pick some formulas that are best suited to the area we're looking at. And for this study, we used a per capita method, the minimum staffing method, the IAP staffing model, and the workload-based approach. As you saw, the results with that were, I do believe your city is the law enforcement services that you receive are staffed very well. As I put in my responses to some of your questions, I also think you guys benefit greatly from the fact that, you have a minimum staffing that you require in your contract, but you're lucky because you have this great agency that's got, it's got more people than just the people they dedicate to Fairfield County. So if there's some type of emergency where their staffing runs low, they actually have the ability to pull people from other areas of the county to staff Canal Winchester if they actually had to. So that's something you wouldn't have if you had your own police department, clearly. we'll start with just the first question. The question was that what method does the Fairfield County Sheriff's Department use? And I'm assuming you meant to determine their staffing needs, and that wasn't part of the scope of this study, so I didn't ask. I mean, that's something I'm sure they'll be willing to talk to you about. The second question talked about using the methods we used. Does the report assume that the supervisor is also patrolling? So really the way I'd like to answer that is ideally the number of law enforcement officers that we would recommend that you have staffing the city and patrolling the city would be the number of line officers that are sufficient to handle the workload that you're seeing, okay? In Canal Winchester, you guys have 12 deputies currently assigned to Canal Winchester, plus a supervisor, plus a comm manager and a deputy, or a comm tech and a deputy, is that correct? Okay. And we believe that's sufficient. And again, I mentioned in my response to that answer that yes, in circumstances where you may have emergencies in terms of staffing, they have other people that they can pull to staff. So yes, although we recognize that there are 13 people assigned to patrol from the sheriff's office, that 12 number is important because that's how many people are usually answering the calls. No offense, but the sergeant's got a lot of administrative duties, I'm sure, just like the sergeant for any agency. Due to the severity of calls was the next question, using crime data or crime trends, does that ever get included in the calculation? Or do we just assume the 45 minutes per call is accurate? So as I talked about in the report a little bit, the data that we received from Fairfield County's CAD system was great data. I mean, we were able to separate the calls for service in terms of calls initiated by the public, calls initiated by the officers, administrative calls and that type of thing. But in looking at the total number of minutes on average that I got using that data, there's just no way it's accurate. It came out to about 218 minutes on average per call. And there's no way, Sergeant Walker will tell you, there's no way that's accurate. That's almost 4 hours a call. So there's a lot of reasons that may be like that, but because that data was not accurate, we used that 45 minutes as a standard for this, which is an estimate that's accepted, that it's, I can't say that it's absolutely tailor-made for your city, but it's a generally accepted rule that is around what it takes to complete an average police call, whether it's a long involved crime or something very quick like a lockout or something like that. So that's an average. Using crime data, that is something we could not do with this report because you do not have your own police department, you do not report your neighbor's crime data to the FBI. In the FBI's crime data, if you try to look up Canal Winchester, there's nothing. So the sheriff's office obviously reports their data to the FBI, but they report the data for the entire county. So that is one thing that is a little more difficult to come up with when you don't have your own police department, because you're not making that type of crime data reports to the FBI. So yes, we use that 45-minute standard to come up with the estimates that we came up with. And again, that's FBI data that you can look up. It's called Crime Data Explorer. It used to be the Uniform Crime Reports, but Crime Data Explorer is what they use now. The fourth question was, it said that it appears that the sheriff's office does not accurately track average time to handle. Again, this could be for a lot of reasons. This is not a fault of the sheriff's office. This is more a fault of a CAD system that they are replacing. They recognize they need to update it, and it's being updated currently. I don't know if it's online yet, but June, beautiful, beautiful. And I can attest, having gone through, that's a painful process to go through, I can tell you. But when you do get there and you finally get the data that you need and you work out how to extrapolate that data, it's going to be much better because you're going to have a much more up-to-date system. But that was difficult. We were able to extrapolate what looked like and this is based on our expertise, simply looking at the call titles, what we think were the citizen-initiated calls, the officer-initiated calls, the administrative calls. But again, when I put those numbers together and tried to get an average for the time spent on those citizen-initiated calls, it was much, much higher than I know that would be realistic. The next question talked about the spread of geography and the amount of time it takes to get to a call and that type of thing, because Canal Winchester is a smaller geographic, has a smaller geographic footprint. Does that figure in? It really doesn't, because we're simply looking at the time they're tied up on a call, okay? The CAD system can determine that amount of time if you need it, and that is something that maybe in a future staffing study, if you ever do decide to get your own police department at some point, which at this point I don't think it would be necessary, clearly, but you could look at things like how long it's taking for an officer to get to a call, and then how long they spend on the call. The CAD system will absolutely give you that data, but all we were looking at is the amount of time that they were tied up on a call. The next question had to do with our final recommendation on the future for 2028. And this is the one where I just want to caution you, this is a it's a broad estimate. I can't give you an accurate look at what you're going to see in 2028 because we don't know. Again, first of all, we don't have crime data, so I can't tell you whether your crime issues are going up or down. The sheriff's office could probably anecdotally tell you, but there is no actual NIBRS crime data to give to you on that. But based on your growth, which has been significant, obviously here, if we extrapolate from that growth will continue at least for the next 5 years, we can get an idea of how many residents you're going to have and possibly how many more deputies you would need or officers you would need patrolling the city. So that's how we came up with that method, or that estimate. Finally, the question I got late this afternoon, I did get that before I came out here, is did we take into consideration outside growth, Columbus, that type of thing, and how much growth you're seeing just outside the city borders when we make that future determination. And I'll tell you what, I did not, for two reasons. It really wasn't part of the scope of the study, number one, but number two, at least from my experience, and I was the chief in a city that had huge growth in the city itself, and then even bigger growth in the city of Columbus surrounding us. I mean, huge apartment complexes and housing complexes and that type of thing. In the 8 years that I was chief, the property crime rate actually went down. And there was huge growth in both the city and in the areas around us. Now, in full disclosure, the violent crime rate did go up, but the way we measure whether we're being successful when in Dublin, when I was police chief, was we looked at our index crimes, which were, it's going to be the same in any city in America. What's the most common crime you're going to see in any city in America? Anybody?
Theft.
Shoplifting?
Theft. Any city. I mean, it may be the most violent city in America, still the most common crime you're going to see is theft. So the things we looked at in our city to help us determine whether crime was going up or down and to help us determine where we needed to focus our efforts was the property crime rates. And property crime rates went down steadily. And that's in part, we believe, because we focused on that strongly. But again, my experience was that yeah, you get more people, and you may get more calls in terms of traffic crashes, because you are going to get more traffic, obviously. But in terms of crime, that it wasn't really a significant difference. So,
Follow up to that, please. Chief, you said that your property crime went down, but your violent crime did go up?
yes, during that time period. But we still, in Dublin, as in a lot of the suburbs, our violent crime rate was very low. So again, the index crimes we looked at to help us determine where we needed to focus our resources were the property crime, index crimes. However, if we were seeing a particular type of violent crime that was an issue, that was something we had to respond to right away. But the trends that we followed were mostly our property crimes.
Because the theft happens consistently.
Oh, absolutely.
And the violent crime may pop its head up on occasion.
Absolutely, and you know, we always felt like there's always been the argument that can we really affect crime, and can we really affect reducing crime? But, you know, we probably wouldn't be in this business if we felt we couldn't. We always felt that we could, because crime is obviously, when people commit crime, it's something they do. There's a thought process that goes behind it. They make a decision, they commit a crime. So there are often patterns to that crime. Crashes and things like that, reducing those type of things are more difficult, because what's the difference between a crime and a crash? A crash is random and accidental, correct? So we always felt that we could affect it by focusing our resources, and I mean, I think the evidence was there that we did. Obviously, there's other factors. But yes, violent crime isn't something you should ignore, but it was a much lower crime rate than our property crime rate. I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish your
I
statement.
was just going to say, the bottom line is you guys receive fantastic service from the Fairfield County Sheriff's Office. You know, the impression I got when I was working with the city was that they feel like it's their police department. They're pretty happy with the service. They're very happy with the service. And the impression I got when I spoke to the sheriff's office was they really enjoy having the ability to kind of work this as their own city and their own police department for the city. So it's kind of a nice marriage of services, I think.
So I was just going to ask you a couple questions. Can you define, when you say violent crimes, can you define what you consider violent crimes?
Oh, yeah, it's not what I consider. It's the Part 1 crimes that are defined by the FBI. I'm a little rusty. I've been retired for a little while. But murder, aggravated assault, rape,
DV.
and robbery. No, DV is not considered a Part 1 violent crime. It's a Part 2.
Okay.
So that's what we look at.
So when you say violent crimes increased, you're
We were looking at the
serious
Part 1
things.
violent crimes. Now, we look at Part 2 also, but Part 1 mostly, yes.
Okay. First of all, I did want to thank you for the way you broke down the math. That was very helpful in understanding how you came to some of your equations. So on some of we were talking about the population and the potential growth. Did you look at census data and the birth rate, death rate when you were doing those?
I looked at census data, correct. Not necessarily birth rate, death rate, simply population change and demographics.
Okay. So did you use a trend of how many years?
Let me look. I did.
Okay.
I just don't want to tell you the wrong thing. I believe it was from the 2010 census to present. I used that rate of growth and extrapolated from that what the growth would be from now until 2028.
Okay. And then I noticed a lot of this is based around our current sheriffs, and I know that you had Sergeant York, Chief York, make sure I don't demote anybody.
Chief York
Chief
from
York.
Madison Township, yes.
But it looked like a lot of the data is based around the sheriffs, so how many of the calls were Madison Township calls? How much of this data that's been incorporated includes what Madison is doing, so that we can
Well, the
see the
reason-
contrast?
The reason I did not use the Madison Township data is realistically, when I spoke to the sheriff's office and I looked at the data, all the dispatch calls are to the sheriff's office. Everything that I looked at from Madison Township that I could determine were things that were self-initiated. These were not calls that were initiated by residents in the city, so in my opinion, it wasn't as relevant as the sheriff's data.
Because we get a monthly report of all sorts of things they're attending to, but it didn't look like they were
No.
included any of that data. So out of the calls, that answers, I think, my second question. Most of the call charts that you've given us are all based on the sheriff's data that was
Absolutely.
provided.
Yes.
The vacation coverage, this is more for my fellow council members. When we have people that ask about us having our own police force, that vacation data plays a huge impact on if we were to do it, just seeing how how huge it could be that we'd have to look at depth-wise to ensure coverage as we move forward.
I mean, the rule of thumb is to staff one position every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, you have to have 5 people. So there's, extrapolate that out to however
one
many you're going to
shift.
need. No, one person,
One body, one car.
24 hours a day, all year. And then, obviously, you consider the fact that you would have to, you'd have to have administrative personnel, you'd have to have supervisory staff, command staff.
Dispatch.
You might have to have this, I certainly wouldn't recommend you do that, but, and whatever you do, don't build your own jail.
Thank you very much.
I have, when you talk about in question 5 here in the CAD system that they're on, or they're going to something different, right? Is that, what is different, and will that be able, once that system's in place, would you be able to get a better idea than kind of just guessing the 45 minutes? If you were able to get like 6 months of information after that was instilled?
Well, you'd want a full year, and I don't want to speak for the sheriff's office in terms of what their system can do, but from my experience, going to a more advanced system is, it's technology. So technology it gets better all the time. They're going to a better product that I think will be able to give them better data. I will tell you, just again, from my experience, we probably would be able to get more accurate data and give you a more accurate look at how much time an officer or a deputy spends on average on a call. You'd probably even be able to break it down to how many of the calls are two deputy calls and that type of thing. But you know what? The bottom line will probably be you'll come to about the same conclusion. That's my guess.
Okay. Well, and also with the FBI numbers, and maybe this is a better question to the sheriff's office, is there any way to break out, how hard would it be to break out just the city of Canal instead of the whole county?
It's something I can look into, sure. Our problem is with our current CAD system, we're extremely limited, and our records management system.
So if you change to this new system and then maybe you had a way to do a zip code of 43110 or something like that?
So the new system, it's a $2.1 million commitment from the Fairfield County Commissioners and Sheriff. It is promised.
Maybe give him the mic there.
Give him the mic.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so it's promised from the manufacturer and all of our tech people that this system will provide us any report we could ever think of asking for. What that means, I have no idea, but I do know that the run-up on this has been a year and a half. It's an all-encompassing system. So before we had 5 different siloed systems that didn't speak to each other. This system is the jail, it's our civil division, it's our records management, it's the CAD, it's everything under our roof is managed by this system. So they've assured me that really any report we could think of asking for, this system will give us.
You believe integration is going to happen in June?
Well, right now, they're in the final stages of the jail build. They go online, I believe, here in the next 3 weeks. The patrol build and the evidence build is in process. They're telling us June. For a second, I don't necessarily believe that. I'll let you know when the jail rollout goes and how smooth it goes.
I would just say from experience, be patient with them, because to get the CAD system reports to the point where they want them, where they're giving them the data they need, might take a little while. It always does.
Right, and we're ready. Our current system wasn't the best when we got it, but it was, at the time, all we could afford. That's the reality of the situation. You know, a good example, it went down for 2 days over the weekend. And that, when your agency has been used to being computer-only for the last 8 years, I believe I had a lieutenant running around with paper reports for guys to fill out to catch up. So, yeah, again, we're really looking forward to this. This is, it's a game changer for the agency, it really is.
How hard would it be when you get that data to just, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel here and do a whole net, to like just throw those numbers in a thing and just make sure the numbers are what they're saying? Because this is a lot of assumption to me, but I'd like to get
Well, I
more,
mean,
but-
let me just say, any report like this there's going to be a lot of assumptions. I mean, the reason you have someone with law enforcement executive experience doing one of these is because you do have to make some assumptions, because it's not an exact science. You know, it depends. If the city would like to look at this again in the future when there's a little more data, the only thing I would caution you is, let's wait until we can get what we think we need.
Sure.
And then you could look at it again, absolutely.
It took a while to get the mark system in and that's improved things quite a bit, right, with Madison and.
Absolutely. You know, I can't speak for Madison, I really can't, but as far as that radio system was a game changer for us also. We have currently 0 dead spots throughout the entire county and our area here, and it's a safe and extremely effective radio system.
Yes.
So when I was doing my review of your report, there's quite a variance in the suggested number. So the per capita is suggested is 18, the minimum staffing model, the suggested is 20, the IACP, the suggested is 7, and the workload model suggests 10. That's quite a variance. So I was actually the person who kind of asked some of these questions. So I'm sorry, Sergeant Collins?
Chief Collins.
Chief Collins, I apologize. See, now I'm demoting him. See what you people made me do? No, just kidding. So Chief Collins, do you know what combination of these methods Fairfield County Sheriff's Office uses?
You're talking to determine staffing level
Correct.
in our areas in Fairfield
I'm assuming
County?
these are generally accepted, known models across different kinds of police agencies. Do you know what kind of models you guys use to determine your staffing?
I know the general formulas in which we use, okay? You know, generally, if we're talking about Canal Winchester, or if we're talking one of my other areas, there are different factors at play. Number one, we're under contract here, so we'll staff it with what you provide, given our recommendations. And our recommendations, and that's what they are, our recommendations, are based off of call volume, area covered, and even a comparison to other areas in the county. Okay? Like the chief said, your violent crime is extremely low. It is. And even compared to other areas of Fairfield County, your violent crime is low. Your policed area is much smaller than other areas of the county. So of course, anything we do here when, you know, and it has to be one of the factors that I look at for staffing is comparison to other areas that I cover. And with the exception of your retail issues, there's very little else. This, you know, I hate to break it to you, but Canal Winchester is a wonderful place to live. It really is. You know, your low crime rates, you know, it is. It's a safe and good place to raise your families.
I will say, if I was in the sheriff's shoes and you guys came to me, I would do exactly what they did, because, you know, they have the benefit of you coming to them and saying, here's the minimum number of deputies we want on the street at all times. It's pretty easy to come up with a number that way, and that's what I would do.
this chief, do you recommend, you use the workload and the per capita for your final recommendation. Do you normally make that recommendation for any municipality?
Well, because of the limited amount of data I have for the future, that's why I use those two. Most of the time when we do these studies, we don't look at the future, really. It's just such an inexact science, like I said. It's a little easier if I have crime data, maybe, but based on the data I had, those were the two easiest to use. I mean, you know, the FBI, everybody cautions, don't use that per capita method too much to determine what your staffing should be. But the nice thing about the per capita method is if you're looking at similar agencies, and we can argue all day what similar jurisdictions, we can argue all day what that is, but that does kind of give you a guess as to where you should be. If you have 5 cities, 6 cities that are all fairly similar, looking at what that per capita number is can kind of help you.
I do want to say thank you to the Sheriff's Office for the high level of service that you do provide to us. And you know that safety is very important to every one of us up here. So we want to continue that trend and keep those numbers down. So it is greatly appreciated.
Lori, I'm glad you pointed out the different levels. I kind of looked at it as a SWOT analysis, SWOT with an O, not an A.
SWOT, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I kind of looked at it like a SWOT analysis and kind of looked at each one as the strength, the weakness, the
Yeah.
opportunity, the threat, and how we could play each one differently based on what we were dealing
Right.
with. So I was glad you thought.
Yeah. And then and thank you, Chief Collins, because I kind of didn't factor in some of the other things about you get what you pay for. So whatever we, as a city, have asked you to provide, you bake that into your calculations as well. So thank you for that.
Mr. Shea?
Yes, sir. As was discussed and mentioned, retail theft is probably our biggest challenge here. Do you have, work with your experience and, you know, working in Dublin, they had a lot of retail and such. Did you have any strategies to combat retail theft? And this is question 1 and 2, is having a special duty officer required to be at high incident locations an effective way to drive down theft?
Well, I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to tell them how to do their job. I mean, yeah.
Well, I'm just trying to pick your
No, I
brain
know.
from experience.
Having a cop at a high theft location is definitely a deterrent, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, our most common crime was actually thefts from vehicles. Theft, people stealing things out of cars. That was our number 1 crime.
Thank you.
It would do that as well as free up a deputy as well, or an officer.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
If there was a security officer at a high crime place of theft, would free up a deputy as well from having to make
If they had
as many
their own
calls.
security person, you mean?
Yes.
Sometimes, if they still have to plow that report, we talked about that the one time, it still means they have to do that call out.
Thank you. This is a very good report.
Thank you.
It was worth the wait.
Yes, thank you.
And
Thank you.
Chief Collins, thanks for your continued service to Canal Winchester.
Yeah.
And thanks for letting us have Sergeant Walker.
Yeah, we'll
She
keep
does a
her.
great job.
Absolutely, and I'd like to thank all you. Again, we, you know, in working with the chief here, it's always nice to see the raw numbers and, you know, see exactly, you know, that we're doing the right thing. And, you know, we've had this relationship for well over 20 years now, and it's been just, I can't say enough on behalf of the sheriff. We would really like to continue, and, you know, we can feel at home up here.
And when you look at that report, just remember Sergeant Kelly Walker's name should be on there. My bad. So,
No, she's part of all of it for us.
yeah.
I apologize.
Chief Collins, real quick.
Sergeant
so-
Walker, I started looking at Collins and I'm thinking, no, okay.
So you can answer one of the questions. In here, they point out the city determined the performance objective is 20 minutes obligated to citizen-initiated calls for service. What's the other 40?
Oh, that was actually, if
that
I
your
could
number or
remember, I'm
his
sorry,
number?
that was actually a number that we determined when I was meeting with the city, because really, that determination should be up to the city. What they feel that their officers, whoever's patrolling their city, their target for what they want their officers to have in terms of obligated time. So they feel that that target of 20 minutes is what would be ideal for Canal Winchester. And, you know, I'm sure that's not far off of what they probably think too. They don't want their deputies running call to call to call and not having any time to do anything but take paper.
Right, exactly, and the exact opposite goes also. I really don't want deputies sitting on 33 for 7 hours writing tickets to, you know, not getting in their neighborhoods or, you know, not responding on calls. So it does, there has to be a good balance, and that's what policing is all about, is good balance.
Yeah, I just have a quick one for you, Chief.
Which chief?
Chief von Eckersberg, sorry.
That's right.
When you left Dublin, do you have any idea off the top of your head how many officers you had at that point in time?
We had 72. We were, in terms of per capita, we were one of the lower. I think we actually had 1.45 was our ratio. I think they're up to 1.5 now. I think they have 76 officers now. You know, I felt like we should have about 90, which actually would have still been below the state average, but Dublin's 50,000 people now.
What is the state average?
I could look, I can't remember, it's in there, 2.3?
Well, 2.48 was what was listed within we got Canal Winchester, Groveport, Obetz, Pickerington, Powell, Johnstown, and Grandview Heights.
Right, the state average is in there too, and I got that again from the FBI statistics, I can't remember. 2.3, thank you. And with cities of a population of 10,000 to 24,900, it's 2.4, which is virtually the same. And again, the reason I used that measure was you guys are virtually at 10,000, and you will be in a couple of years, so it made more sense to use that measure. Any other questions?
Thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you very much for
Thank you.
conducting this. We've been after this for a while, so I appreciate you finalizing this, and our citizens can digest this and go from there. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Brings us to mayor and council salaries. Is there any appetite for that tonight?
I think we can push that back.
Push that?
Yeah.
Okay.
We did get that letter that Mrs. Sargent sent to all of us, did sort of touch on that a little bit. You
Yes.
know, and she's concerned as a member of the public about timeline and getting it done. If we do let it go tonight, we gotta dig into it.
Yeah.
Absolutely dig into it next meeting.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. All right, brings us to Chamber of Commerce Council Representative. Do we have any volunteers?
Yeah, I had Jordan put this on the agenda, and I think Ms. Amick might have been touching on this via email at some point. In my communication with Denise Mathias at the Chamber, it dawned on me that we have yet to assign someone to report to council as part of our agreement with that we had with them. And so, does anybody want to throw their name in the hat for that?
I will if Steve will trade me for JRD.
No, it doesn't work that way.
I think it's a
We're
fair
trying to
trade.
trade the JRD off.
Steve, I think you're the only.
Yeah, I'm the only
doesn't
one
have-
not currently, so I'll be more than happy to.
You do? All
Okay.
right.
Are you able to
Great.
attend their meetings? Or are they still meeting in like middle of the week? Is that right? Does anybody know when they meet?
When do their board meetings?
I think, don't they?
Typically meet like Wednesday morning.
That's what I thought. Are you able to make that?
I should be able to arrange that.
I mean, even if you're not, I mean, sometimes like what we do is just, communicate via email, so.
Sure.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah, I don't see this being really any different than like what Mr. Walker does representing Human
Yeah.
Services. Just he gets a report from the leader of that organization, and he gives that report to council, so.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Buzzkirk. Brings us to July recess. I think we finalized pretty much
I'm in
this.
favor.
We're all good,
Yes.
yeah,
Well,
with doing.
in the minutes, I think Mr. Milliken had suggested we let Mr. Shea weigh in publicly.
Oh, yes, that's right. We were talking about,
We want to take it
Do you
the
know what
first
we're talking
weekend.
about, the July?
Yeah, I think we should take the whole month off.
Okay. We got to meet one time every month, I think, in the charter or
Mayor's on
something.
board.
But Mayor's on board with
We need
that.
to be like the Texas legislature, show up like for a month every 2 years and, you know,
Yeah.
stay the hell out of the way of people.
So nobody
All right.
has an issue, it sounds like.
So I think we're
first
good. Yeah, so we missed July 5th date or whenever the July, and then we will, July 3rd, and then we will come in, what's the date? July
17th and 30.
17th?
And then
Okay.
committee of the whole on the
30th.
31st.
Okay. Okay, thank you. If that, we have any other new or old business?
Motion to adjourn, oh, sorry.
I do have a question. One of the gentlemen I participated in a polar plunge with sent an email to us today, and so I was calling him up about that. And so if you live in the city, but you're not taxed by any other city, you are required to pay income taxes? Is that how that works?
I was going to ask the same.
That's correct.
Okay.
For a little bit of history, Mr. Redmond and I speak every year on this topic.
He said it would be an annual conversation.
Oh, it's his favorite thing to do every year. He has it on his
Every
calendar.
year.
Yeah.
I think in his email, he asked if any of us pay Canal Winchester taxes. So,
I do.
for the
I do.
record, I do
I
pay
do.
Canal Winchester taxes. I have a reciprocity.
Technically, you all do, through
Yes.
your pay as a Canal Winchester City Council member as well.
Yeah, we have a reciprocity.
I pay on my
agreement
other
where I
income,
work, So
too.
I have to pay 2 cities.
That's good.
Yeah, it's lovely.
All right.
Taxes are good.
Have a motion to adjourn by Mr. Shea, second by Mrs. Amos. Roll call, please.
Mr. Shea?
Yes.
Miss Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Miss Amos?
Yes.
We will reconvene at 7:35 for full council.
Thank you. Doing the checker thing.
No problem.
Thing. It's a weird thing.
I'd like to call to order the February 21st, 2023 Canal Winchester City Council meeting to order. Pledge allegiance will be led by Mr. Walker.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Amick?
Present.
Ms. Amos?
Here.
Mr. Busker?
Here.
Mr. Clark?
Here.
Mr. Milligan?
Here.
Mr. Shea?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here?
Time in is 7:35. First item, approval of minutes, minutes 23-006, February 6, 2023 work session minutes. Discussion? Hearing none, need a motion to approve.
So moved?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Buskirk, second by Mrs. Amos. Roll call?
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milligan?
Yes.
Mr. Shea?
Abstain?
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Minutes 23-007, February 6 City Council meeting minutes. Discussion? Hearing none, I need a motion to approve.
So moved?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Buskirk, second by Mrs. Amos. Roll call.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milligan?
Yes.
Mr. Shea?
Abstain?
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Communications and petitions, communication 23-002, Madison Township Police Statistics for January of 2023 are in your packet and part of the public record. Public comments, I didn't see anybody sign in. Was there anybody that wished to? There's no place to sign in. Oh, it was up at the, it's up at the entrance there.
I think he's disqualified, isn't he, because he didn't?
I'm not telling them.
I think we can manage.
What a pen.
Right?
Courtesy of Data Ridge.
Yeah.
Canal Winchester.
It's a nice tagline.
The last time I had two subjects to go over, and I asked for 6 minutes, and tonight I have 3, so I know it's not there's no chance I'll get 9. First of all, really quick, and it's coming up, I think, next week or whatever, but council raises. You need to take a raise. Don't be embarrassed. We'll pay you. You're worth it. I can't imagine that this is a part-time job that you do an hour a week. I know you don't. Every time you come in, it seems like you're prepared, and you know the situations, you know the challenges, and I think you need to get a raise this time. It's been 4, you've declined 4 times to take a raise?
Yeah, you know, since I've...
It's time, and make it substantial. I hope you agree. The next thing, city manager. I was on the Charter Commission, and at that time, I think it was voted, there was 1 vote positive for having a city manager, so you know where we stood on that, and I was against having a city manager. However, we already have a city manager, and it's Matt Peoples. He knows more about this city, Matt, more about this city than anybody in the city. He knows where all the sewer lines are. He knows where all the electric lines are. He knows where all the plumbing is. I think this would be a really easy job. Not the city manager job, but this would be really easy. All that council would have to do is give him the title of city manager. We already have a city manager. We could promote Bill Sims to replace Matt. Council, if you do agree to have a city manager, it would take, I don't know how many weeks, how many months to find an applicant. Then when you have applicants, you're going to have to interview the applicants. And then you're going to have to go back and you're going to have to decide which applicant would be the most positive for the city. So it would eliminate all that stuff. Deciding, how long did it take for, how long did it take for you guys to get a DORA? Years. How long would it take to get a city manager? More than years. So that would eliminate that. In fact, I wrote down, is that if we'd have a city manager by the year 2026, we'd be lucky. We don't move that fast. Let's see, city manager. Matt, what do you think?
I'll pay you later.
Strike that.
Okay. Okay, and then the only thing you'd have to do then is decide what you want to do with the mayor's office. How much you want to pay the mayor, what you expect him to do, and then you could, that would be maybe a little easier. What do you think, Mayor?
Yeah, it's up to you.
Not up to me. And the last thing. What?
By all means, continue.
It couldn't be 3 minutes already.
That was a big.
I need to watch that clock a little closer. Anyway, and my last thing, pickleball. It's an embarrassment that we don't have a facility to do pickleball. I went to the Groveport Rec Center last week, or Monday, just to see, I wanted to see how to maybe score it, how to play it. I had no idea. I had never played it nor watched anybody play it. It was interesting and it was fantastic. They have it divided into 3 courts on one side of their basketball courts, 3 courts on one side, 2 on the other. They were full. They had been full all morning. They have a time limit. I think they do it from 8 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock. They were full. And guess what? Out of the 3 areas that I was watching, the 3 nets that I was watching, 5 of the participants were from Canal Winchester. 5 out of 12 people were from Canal Winchester playing pickleball. We don't have anything here. It's the hottest thing going right now. It's amazing that when it's over, they break down the nets. It fits in a bag that's smaller than a golf bag, and they store them, they put them in a room, and it's done. We can't have an indoor pickleball. What about the room that's next door? What about the community center that they could set up? And what about the middle school? They have a gymnasium there, and it's a line on the floor that's 1 inch wide. I mean, it's a blue line and it's easy. And you can't hit a ball if you're in the kitchen. Whatever the heck that is, but I found out where the kitchen was, which it's a really interesting game. And I think that we need to have something here in Canal Winchester. I know it's planned for McGill Park, but it's winter time. So we need to do something. Get somebody to sponsor a pickleball league, and let's do it in Canal Winchester. We would really have a lot of residents. 5 out of 12 people there were from Canal Winchester. It's embarrassing that they have to go to Groveport to play pickleball, and it's a fantastic game.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to buy a paddle for $40, and they won't let me bring my tennis racket. So, thank you very much. I'm sorry to go over my 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Ms. Amos, is there any news on pickleball as far as JRD's? I know we're getting ahead of.
No, but I did want to tell you that both Patrick and I have approached the school on numerous occasions, had conversations with Pat Durbin about potentially making the pickleball courts at the tennis courts, and the school has given us a definitive no at this point.
Yeah, our tennis players wouldn't be smart enough to hit the ball on the regular tennis court and not worry about the one thin blue line that's on the tennis court.
I can't answer that. Well, they referred more to the Ohio High School. They just didn't want to confuse the Ohio High School lines. But we will be happy to revisit. We're happy to have more conversations.
What are you trying to say about that?
I was questioning that too, Mayor, but that was.
All right, okay.
Is it the, I know, Sergeant Walker's avoiding the thin blue line conversation.
Yeah. All right, we'll get back on track here. Thank you, Mr. Bayline.
Do I need to come up next week and ask for it again?
Maybe, I don't know, we'll see.
2 weeks, see you then.
It might be raises.
Yeah.
Might
Mayor's
read it.
report, Mayor Ebert.
I have nothing to add to my written report. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Thank you, Mayor. Fairfield County Sheriff's Department, Sergeant Walker.
Hello, thank you. I have nothing for you, but I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Sergeant Walker. Law Director, Mr. Shamp.
Thank you. No formal report. I know we have a request for an executive session tonight for economic development purposes, so I've circulated some language for that. And then I was asleep on the job during the work session, but we need to have a motion and a vote to amend the council calendar in July. So just whenever that comes up, feel free to do that.
And the Meyer site plan.
We still got to review that one. We don't have to do that tonight, though.
Well, we gotta have that language on that.
Oh, yeah. I think we have time.
That's all.
I'm sorry, Mr. Shea, was that a part of the calendar that you were talking about? I didn't hear what you were
The
saying.
Meyer site plan, the
Okay.
suggestion,
Gotcha.
that with the truck parking we were talking about,
Yep.
we'll make sure we get that added in that ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Shamp. Public Service Director, Mr. Peoples.
Thank you, Mr. Milliken. Nothing to add to my written report.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We'll just go ahead and have questions for Mr. Peoples. Ms. Jackson, I'll get to you in a moment. All right. Sorry, I wrote down on the wrong spot on my notes. So Finance Director, Ms. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Milliken. I don't have anything in addition to my written report this evening.
All right, shouldn't have gone to you anyways. Mr. Shea.
I see on your written report that the outstanding debt discussion. What's your discussion leading to at this point? I mean, because really, it's going to be, this council decides if we're going to spend the money or not. And, I mean, if we want to do it, can we do it? Or do you recommend against it?
When you say spend the money, you mean spend the money to pay it off?
Yes, ma'am.
Our hesitation at this point is that we are still having discussions about McGill Park Phase 2 and trying to determine how to move forward with that. The cost estimates that we got for Phase 2 is extreme. And so we are looking at what we could possibly do to phase that, to get some more work done out there, and potentially reissuing some of those bond anticipation notes to make that happen. So that's kind of where we're at. We're trying to prioritize what could get done out there that wouldn't affect future phases. Essentially, we don't want to build something and then run it over to get to the next phase kind of thing. So we're still trying to talk through that.
Does Phase 2 have pickleball?
Phase 2 does have pickleball, yes.
Any other questions for Mr. Jackson?
Hey, how are we trending on income tax revenues year over year, January?
I believe we are just slightly ahead of where we were at this point last year. So nothing really to write home about.
So we're just holding steady, kind of?
As of right now, no. Obviously, income taxes are, a cyclical thing. There's a lot of people who wait until April to file and pay. So, some years you may see numbers stay steady, just like they were the year before, and other years you may see it go up and down. For me, the big thing is, what does it look like, halfway through the year, 3/4 of the way through the year, that kind of thing, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Development Director, Mr. Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Milliken. Just a reminder, we have the comp plan work sessions coming up tomorrow and Thursday. So hopefully we'll see some of you there attending those. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about economic development from 11 to noon, talk about some specific site planned areas, 3 areas in the city, looking at specific land use plans for those areas, and then a public open house tomorrow evening. And then on Thursday, there's a session in the morning discussing transportation and sustainability, roundtable discussion, and then we'll be doing a similar open house at lunch, and then working on this, further refining and validating those site plans for those specific areas. So hopefully we'll get a lot done. Also tomorrow, TRAC is having their work session, and so that's tomorrow afternoon. I'll be at the comp plan work session, so Mr. Peoples will be listening on the call for the TRAC session, so hopefully we'll have a better indication whether the US 33 projects will be able to move forward with TRAC funding this year. They won't vote on that tomorrow. That'll be at their March meeting.
Can I ask about the track process? I know we went in all the projects together, but will they would they pick like one to move before the other and things like that, I would imagine?
That's likely that what would happen. So the way this works is they've requested preliminary engineering and design dollars and right-of-way dollars. And so that's what's with their request, and they've requested them all as one project. So the $31+ million is just for that preliminary engineering.
Okay, so they would probably
then-
move the three of those simultaneously with the money.
Correct.
The
So there's-
31 would pay for all the projects of that.
Yeah, they
Okay.
have what they call
then
tier 1 and tier 2.
Construction dollars would be later, that would be, one might get chosen over the other to move forward, okay. All
Correct. So
right.
that would come when it moves between tiers, between statuses.
Okay.
And they would likely split those projects up to move it to the next tier of construction.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. We don't have any resolutions this evening. We'll move on to ordinance 23-004. Clerk, if you'd read that, please.
An ordinance to authorize the mayor to enter into a lease agreement with James N. Stevenson for a 30 plus or minus acre tract of land on Parkview Drive.
Discussion? Sponsor is Mrs. Amos.
Motion to adopt ordinance 23-004.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Amos, second by Mr. Shea. Roll call.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Shea?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes. Ordinance 23-008. Clerk, if you'd read that, please.
An ordinance to authorize the mayor or designee to enter into a contract with V3 Companies for the design services of the Water Reclamation Headworks Replacement Project.
Discussion? The sponsor is Mr. Buskirk.
I move to adopt ordinance 23-008 and request to waive the third reading.
So we'll do those separately. We'll do a motion to waive the third reading.
Second.
So motion on the floor by Mr. Buskirk to waive the third reading, second by Mr. Shea.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Mr. Shea?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes. And then a motion on the floor by Mr. Buskirk,
Second.
second by Mr. Shea to adopt ordinance 23-008. Roll call.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Mr. Shea?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes. Ordinance 23-009. Clerk, if you'd read that, please.
An ordinance to authorize the mayor and finance director to enter into an agreement for the purchase of a Case IHF 75C four-wheel drive tractor rear and wing flail mowers and declaring an emergency.
Discussion? Sponsors, Mr. Shea.
I move to declare an emergency for ordinance 23009.
This is just first reading only. Yeah. We're not waiving
No,
readings.
Mr. Shea is correct.
Oh, we are waiving
Yeah,
readings?
We are bumping?
Yeah, I made a mistake on the agenda.
Okay.
So
My
sorry
apologies.
about that.
So motion on the floor to waive second and third readings by Mr. Shea.
Second.
Second by Mr. Walker. Roll call.
Mr. Shea?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes. So I need a motion
I
to,
move to adopt 23009.
Second.
motion made to adopt ordinance 23-009 by Mr. Shea, second by Mrs. Amos. Roll call.
Mr. Shea?
Excuse me, point of order. Hey, Mr. Shamp, do we need to state what the reason for the emergency is, or do we?
It's in the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Aye, yes.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Ordinance 23-010. Clerk, if you'd read the ordinance, please.
An ordinance to amend the 2022 appropriation ordinance number 22-041, amendment number 2.
Discussion? Sponsors, Ms. Zamick.
I'd like to request the waiver of the second and third reading.
Second?
Motion made by Ms. Zamick, second by Mr. Clark. Roll call?
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes.
Mr. Shea?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
I now move to adopt ordinance 23-010.
Second?
Motion made by Ms. Zamick, second by Mr. Busker. Roll call?
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes.
Mr. Shea?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
Ordinance 23-011. Clerk, if you'd read that, please.
An ordinance approving the final development plan for the Meyer store located at 8300 Meyer Drive.
Discussion? Sponsors, Mr. Shea.
I'd like to make a motion to make an amendment to ordinance 23001 to include a restriction on truck parking in the front commercial area of the property.
Second?
Motion made by Mr. Shea, a second by Mr. Walker. Roll call?
Mr. Shea?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes.
Before we go any further, Mr. Shamp, can you help us with language for that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Hare, for any other changes that we want, should we just submit them to you and you guys will submit a revised ordinance? If there's other changes.
Are
that
there
we've
other
seen.
changes? I would suggest we also make motions to add other condition if there's other changes.
Can we have like pink lines on the parking lot? That was a joke.
I mean, you can set conditions as part of a final development plan, you know, I would assume we're gonna talk about parking outside of designated loading areas. We would just amend it to say that commercial parking outside of designated loading areas is not permitted.
Well, and I mean, I don't want to stop a guy who's running in to go to the store, but I mean, I think we're trying to prevent using it as a rest stop, right? So maybe we need to discuss that further, how we want to do that, and that's what our fearless city attorney's here for.
Well, we've got 2 more readings, so if anybody else thinks of any additions, by all means, bring it forward.
First reading only.
First reading only. Council reports. Next work session, council meeting, Monday, March 6th at 6 PM, followed by March 20th at 6 PM. Next, we have CW Human Services, Mr. Walker.
Human Services this year exceeded last year's Super Bowl. So thank you to everyone that contributed and was a part of it, and great year. Anybody have anything to add to that, please feel free. Also, it was sent by Letha Mullins, the director, the updates for tonight's meeting. Senior transportation, we provided they provided 377 one-way trips for the month of January. And tomorrow starts one for the cupboard.
One for the
And,
cupboard.
Cupboard, one for the, thank you. She would like to invite everyone to join Carm Smith at 8 a.m., starting at her shop, and starting at her shop and walking to the pantry. Bring $1 or one item for the pantry, if you will. So, again, one for the cupboard.
I'm sorry, Mr. Walker, what date did you say it was?
It says tomorrow, so
Oh, it's
I
tomorrow?
got this.
It runs through
It's,
Monday.
Oh,
Starts
oh,
tomorrow?
yeah.
Tomorrow?
correct.
Okay. And that's it.
And it can be $1 or $100.
Lori, isn't that how you sold the bowls? They
That's
were
right.
$10 or $100.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. CWICC, Mrs. Amick.
Yes, our next meeting will be on March 29th at 11:30 here in council chambers. And just a reminder, this meeting is open to the public.
Thank you. CWJRD, Mrs. Amos and Mr. Shea.
Mr. Shea was our fearless leader at this last one, so I'll let him take charge.
Lot going on, wrestling season wrapped up. It's almost the deadline for playing spring sports, so get your registrations in so you don't have to pay a late fee. JRD has improved its, with the addition of a director and an assistant, they're improving their operational efficiencies. They've cleaned up their PO systems, so they've freed up their unencumbered fund balance, and they're looking a little bit better. There's some scary challenges coming down the road in terms of referees, umpires, availability and pricing and rates. It's going to greatly affect the cost of youth sports. In addition to that, we've had some challenges with some local leagues, and we're reconfiguring partnerships that we will play against because there's some places we're avoiding due to parental conduct that is unacceptable in the board's eyes.
Good.
We meet again third Thursday, 7 p.m., Old Town Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Next, we have Destination Canal Winchester from the chair. Next Winter Farmers Market, March 4th, 9 a.m. to noon at Faith United Methodist Church. Art on the Canal Stroll is still in the planning process. That'll be May 20th from noon to 6. And then the first Thirsty Thursday on May 23rd at Stradley Park. The band that will be playing is Poverty String Band. And then taking applications for Summer Farmers Market, which will begin on May 26th. Runs through September 30th, and that will be at the Historical Complex again this year. Membership drive continues. Only $50 for a business to become a member of Destination Canal Winchester. Members are only listed on every one of the newsletters that goes out with a link to each business website or Facebook page. And then plans are underway for the 2023 Blues and Ribs Fest. Bands will begin to be booked soon. Sponsorships are filling up quickly. If you have any business interested in becoming a sponsor, they should contact Karen Stiles at info@destinationcw.org. So that's all for Destination. On to old or new business.
Jordan, would you mind adding under council reports, since we're going to start sending somebody to the chamber, can we add that as a new line, please?
Yeah. And thank you.
Any other old or new business? I believe we need a motion to.
Yes, wait a minute, we still have to approve the calendar.
Yeah.
We need to, I make a motion to modify the council calendar to change our vacation in July to the first week of July, and we will have a meeting the third week of July.
All right, motion on the floor by Ms. Amos to revise the city council calendar.
Second.
Second by Mr. Shea. Roll call, please.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Shea?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes. Any other old or new business? Hearing none, the chair will make a motion to enter executive session under Ohio Revised Code 121.22G8 to discuss business strategies relevant to the city and to discuss negotiations with another political subdivision respecting a request for economic assistance.
Second?
Motion made by the chair, second by Mr. Clark. Roll call.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Shea?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Amick?
Yes.
Ms. Amos?
Yes.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Timeout 8:04. Time back in from executive session is 8:27. Need a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second. Motion was made, I think, to adjourn by Mr. Shea, second by Mr. Busker. Roll call.
Mr. Shea?
Yes.
Mr. Busker?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Milliken?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Miss Amick?
Yes.
Miss Amos?
Yes.
Timeout 8:28.
Well, like I said, so far.